and the record button. Oh, it recorded automatically. Good. It shows the participants joining us, so we'll get started once it looks like they're all in. For those of you who have just joined us, welcome. There's a lot of participants that are still joining, so we're going to give them a couple of minutes. When I see that that's stopped, we'll start our program. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Karen Volpe-Gusso, the chairman of the board for the Burbank Chamber of Commerce. We know many of you on the call with us today are leaders in our community, and we thank you for taking your time to be with us today. For the past 6 months, everyone at the Chamber of Commerce has worked diligently to make sure that the Chamber of Commerce has been an information resource for our members and for the community at large. Over a year ago, we started hearing about what was then called the split roll tax. In many of our conversations with the business community, we've discovered that a lot of people did not know anything about this tax or even that it was going to be on the ballot for the fall of 2020. We will have time for questions at the end. Please put your questions to me via the chat box, and we'll answer as many of them as we can at the end of our program today. If your question is for a specific speaker, please include their name and we'll direct it to them. We are happy to have 3 very knowledgeable speakers with us today, along with Tom Flavin, our CEO of the Burbank Chamber of Commerce. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Tino Rossi of Meridian Pacific, who is the statewide director for the No on Prop 15 campaign and his 4th webinar today. Michael Cusumano, a local property owner and developer and a very generous supporter of our community. And Sunder Ramani, senior vice president of West Wind Media, and chairman of the Better Burbank Business Corporation. So with that, we are going to start off with Tino, and it looks like a few more people are joining, but Tino, we're recording, so they'll be able to see it later, and we'll let you get started.
Thanks so much, Karen, for the great introduction. I'm pleased to join each of you today. I love working with our No on Prop 15 coalition partners, especially the Burbank Chamber. For those of you that are on the call and are members, feel comfortable knowing that the Burbank Chamber has provided a critical leadership and voice on this issue. They were one of our earliest supporters. They've been engaged from the very onset that this issue became apparent, that it would be on the November ballot. And since then, Tom, Karen, Sunder, Michael, everyone has made sure that they're doing what they can to keep their membership engaged. As Karen mentioned, I'm the statewide coalition director for the No on Prop 15 campaign. We're the organized coalition opposed to the single largest property tax in California history at $11.5 billion a year. Our coalition is made up of more than 120,000 Californians, from organizations to elected officials, social justice advocates, taxpayers, homeowners, veterans, and everything in between. Our coalition is diverse, we're galvanized, and we're squarely focused on one thing: defeating Proposition 15 in November. But before we get into what the state campaign has been up to and how the Burbank Chamber fits into that, I want to take a little bit of time to walk back what Karen said and give a little bit of a roadmap on how we got here and how Prop 15 appeared on the ballot. In 2018, proponents of what is called a split roll property tax measure proposed that for the first time in California history, residential and commercial and industrial properties would be taxed and assessed differently. If you remember, in 1978, Proposition 13 was passed when many on fixed incomes and many organizations and businesses were seeing their property taxes skyrocket year after year. Seeing the need to create more certainty in these individuals' lives, there was a massive taxpayer revolt that resulted in Proposition 13 being passed. For more than 40 years now, these businesses, homeowners, seniors, veterans, organizations have enjoyed the certainty to know exactly what their property tax bill will be so they can plan accordingly. And I want to stress that nothing is more important in Prop 13 than the certainty it provides to business owners and homeowners across the state of California. In 2018, as I mentioned, the proponents started gathering signature to dismantle one of Prop 13's key protections, and that is that it protects commercial and industrial properties by capping their annual property tax increases at 2%. They missed the deadline to qualify the initiative for the 2018 ballot, even though that was their original intent. So the ballot measure was automatically placed on the 2020 ballot. However, after it was placed on the 2020 ballot, they realized there were some issues, small minor issues with their initiative, and actually started gathering signatures for a second split roll initiative. Once they gathered the signatures, that qualified this May, and that is how we have Proposition 15 on the November ballot. I want to spend a little bit of time also talking about exactly what Prop 15 does. As I mentioned, it would strip away the Prop 13 protection that says your property tax base is calculated based off 1% of your purchase price. So if I buy a building for $100,000, I am paying $1,000 property tax, and each year my property taxes are only allowed to be increased by 2% of that 1,000. Prop 15 removes that protection and says at least every 3 years, and it is likely that it would happen more often, at least every 3 years, those businesses, those buildings, those properties must be reassessed at fair and current best value. So obviously this creates sharp increases in property taxes for our business owners across the state. Now, obviously, there are some parameters which dictate how properties are reassessed, which properties would be reassessed under Prop 15. The initiative says that any property valued at $3 million or more is subject to reassessment. But that's not where it starts. The initiative also allows for the reassessment of any property that's owned by a commercial property owner that owns in aggregate more than $3 million in property. So if I owned 3 properties, each of them were worth $1 million, even though individually those properties would not meet the $3 million threshold, because I am a partial owner in all 3 of those properties would be subject to reassessment under the initiative. Now you might say, well, $3 million, that's a high threshold. It protects our small businesses. We don't need to worry about that. It couldn't be further from the truth. And if you take one thing away from this presentation today, please let it be that Prop 15 would destroy the small business economy in California. And here's why. NFIB finds that more than 70% of the small businesses in the state of California rent the property on which they operate. Any commercial or industrial lease comes with what's called a triple net lease or a pass-through lease, in which the tenant of the building agrees to pay all increases in maintenance, insurance, and property taxes. Meaning our already struggling small businesses, the ones that you think of right away, the bakery down the street, the dry cleaner you've been going to for 10 years, the place you get your nail done, the place you get your hair cut, all of those are likely renters, meaning if Proposition 15 passes, they will see a huge increase in their property taxes. It's no secret that California is a beautiful place to live at times, but a tough place to do business. Most of our small business owners are already operating on razor-thin margins, and introducing a new cost like a sharp increase in property taxes really gives them 2 options. 1, either lay off their employees to save money, or 2, increase the cost of their services. Again, no secret, California is an extremely expensive place to live. Now seems as bad a time as ever to increase the cost of living for Californians statewide. And make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, Proposition 15 will increase your cost of living. Everything you buy from daycares to groceries to healthcare and diapers will get more expensive if Proposition 15 passes. The proponents will tell you that this new initiative will raise $11.5 billion in new revenue at a time when our state desperately needs new revenue. The problem is there is little to no accountability or transparency in this initiative. The initiative, dubbed the Schools and Communities First Initiative, allocates less than 40% of the new revenue to schools. 60% of that revenue goes directly to local governments and is what's called discretionary funds, meaning those elected officials can spend it as they see fit with no guarantee that a dollar makes it to the actual classroom. Additionally, the California Assessors Association estimates that for these folks to implement Proposition 15, it would cost local governments $1 billion, meaning take a $1 billion off the top of that 11.5, give 60% to local governments, and there's a very small amount left for schools. Additionally, Prop 15 perpetuates existing inequalities in the way our property taxes are distributed. Both the Nonpartisan Legislative Analyst's Office and the California Assessors Association have found that more than 21 rural counties would actually lose money under Proposition 15. Under the new initiative, it requires that commercial and industrial properties are reassessed and that a new business personal property tax cut is given in the tune of $500,000. In more than 21 counties, because of the lack of high value commercial and industrial properties, they would actually hand out more tax credits than they would generate revenue in new reassessments, meaning that 21 counties will lose money under the initiative. And for the first time in state history, counties will be asked to generate organic property tax revenue from their businesses, ship it to Sacramento, and allow them to redistribute the funds to communities they see fit need. It's the first time in history counties' local property tax revenue will be shipped to another county. We've also identified over the last 6 months or so a series of flaws that exist within the initiative. We just announced our 7th flaw. Just want to take a quick minute to tick through those. The first one we found was that Prop 15, contrary to claims by the proponent, and this position has been solidified by the Attorney General, Prop 15 does not exempt agriculture. Prop 15 is explicit that ag land would not be subject to reassessment, but fixtures, improvements such as dairies, processing facilities, wineries, machinery, equipment, storage facilities, all subject to reassessment. The California Farm Bureau, Western Growers, Ag Council of California have all said if Proposition 15 passes, your food will get more expensive. The second flaw we identified is Prop 15 removes a previous exclusion for solar construction to be excluded from the term new construction. There's been some activity around this in the legislature. They are trying to pass a bill right now that would grant an exclusion to solar from Prop 15. The California Assessors Association says it's unconstitutional, and our finding is that should Prop 15 pass, it will require solar properties to be taxed, therefore undermining our state's renewable goal energies and de-incentivizing the investment in green energy. Additionally, we talked about the small business impacts. Again, please leave here with the clear idea in your mind that every small business owner you know, every small business you love will be adversely impacted by Prop 15. We've talked about the local government budgets. Some will tell you that this $11.5 billion is needed to address the steep budget gaps that our communities are facing. Again, the Legislative Analyst's Office, Nonpartisan, and the California Assessors Association have both said no new monies would be realized until 2023, and the measure wouldn't even be fully implemented in 2025. Simply put, this initiative does nothing to address the challenges our local communities are facing right now in the face of COVID-19. I'd also like to add just a few more. The initiative also requires that any improvement a business owner makes to make their building more compliant with ADA regulations or fire suppression improvements would actually trigger reassessment. Both of those improvements previously had an exclusion. If Proposition 15 passes, they no longer would. And last one, again, the administrative nightmare that this is. There are 58 county assessors across the state responsible for the implementation of Proposition 15. They are united in their opposition to Prop 15. The California Assessors Association has said that implementing Prop 15 is not difficult, but it is impossible. They simply would need to hire 900 new qualified assessors, for which each one requires 5 years of training, and they're already severely understaffed. From the statewide perspective, our group has galvanized around these flaws. We've created a diverse coalition with members from communities that can speak directly to these flaws. We've got organizations such as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the National Action Network, California Black Chamber of Commerce, California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and they joined more than 2,000 coalition members in their opposition and 120,000 local Californians in their opposition to Proposition 15. The Burbank Chamber is already plugged in to the statewide campaign, but there is ways that this group can help. I implore you, please visit our noonprop15.org website. There you're going to find all the information and resources you need to help mobilize your community in opposition to Prop 15. I specifically ask that you visit the Take Action page. It's at the very top of the website. And on the Take Action page, we've done the best job we can do to put the resources you'll need to help us in one place. You'll find the opportunity to share social media posts, to send out a newsletter, to write a letter to the local newspaper, a letter to your editor, to record a 1-minute video about how Prop 15 would impact you and your business. All of those actions are crucial in our statewide effort to defeat Proposition 15. We've got 70 days to go to the election. You're going to hear from amazing panelists today that have firsthand experience in the economics and the practicality of a split roll property tax measure. And I'm excited to communicate on behalf of the statewide campaign chaired by the California Business Roundtable, CalTax, CalChamber, and the California Business Properties Association that if we work together, if we fundraise the money and we get our messages out, we're going to have success on November 3rd. So let's work together and let's beat Proposition 15 in November. With that, Karen, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Tino. You explain all of it so well, and we really appreciate you taking the time to do that for us today. And now I'm going to turn it over to Michael Cusumano.
Thanks, Karen. And thank you to everyone who is joining us to hear more about the issues with Proposition 15. The stability of business and industry is the foundation of a healthy California economy. Business and industry provides the jobs that we all enjoy and pays a significant portion of the taxes that fund our schools and public services. As Tino noted, Prop 15 would assess as much as $12 billion a year in additional property taxes that will be paid exclusively by businesses and industries within our state. The proponents of Prop 15 have not taken into consideration the impact on job flight if Proposition 15 is successful. There will be an exodus of businesses from our state because our state is already the most highly regulated and expensive state to do business in. Prop 15 will have a catastrophic impact as a significant number of companies will leave our state. Burbank is especially susceptible to this because we are so fortunate in Burbank to have such a robust business economy. The businesses in Burbank provide over 150,000 jobs. We have thousands of businesses in a variety of sectors, including the entertainment industry. And so Burbank will be especially hard hit. And as Burbank bears the brunt of this measure, we're guaranteed very little in return. Burbank has traditionally been underfunded for our schools through the state superintendent. We get significantly less money per student than almost every other school district, including the Los Angeles Unified School District. And so there's nothing to lead us to believe, and there's nothing in this ordinance that would guarantee significant additional funding to our schools. What's guaranteed is $100 per student if this passes. And so, for Burbank to bear this much of a burden, have this much negative impact with virtually nothing guaranteed coming back from the state is really just not in our best interest. The chamber agrees that businesses and investment properties should pay their fair share of municipal and school costs. And right now in Burbank, businesses and investment properties pay more than 55% of the property tax base. And that's fine. And businesses are proud to support municipal services and schools here in Burbank. But for businesses to pay significantly more than that, when Burbank is guaranteed so little in return, is not in the collective best interest of our community. There's other things that we can do, and there's better things that we can do to take care of our local economy here in Burbank. You'll remember that 2 years ago, Burbank voted to tax ourselves an additional 1% of sales tax, so we could take advantage of the opportunity to fund our local city infrastructure. And so a lot of the exposure and a lot of economic shortfall that other cities are experiencing now, Burbank will not face because we were proactive and we did take care of ourselves locally, where we make the decisions and we control our own financial destiny at a local level and not at a state level. Prop 15 is bad for local cities, it's bad for local business, and I think that we can do better as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. We're running way ahead of schedule, so we'll have plenty of time for questions. Our next speaker is the chairman of our Better Business Corporation, and works in the entertainment media industry, which is one of our largest sectors in this community, and definitely has been very hard hit by everything we've been going through these last 5 months. Sunder Ramani, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Karen, and Tino and Michael. Thank you for articulating the nuances and all the detail. I want to take a little bit more of a macro view, especially as it relates to where I'm at in the media space. I'll go back to 1970 when a good friend of mine, Vic, took me to his Lockheed work office. And currently, that was many decades ago, but that building now has been replaced by the Burbank Airport Marriott. But I remember coming down Hollywood Way and looking at an era gone by. So a lot of what's happened since then, many of these light industrial manufacturing buildings that supported the aviation industry have been repurposed for the media industry, which has been growing at a robust pace. Burbank considers itself the media capital of the world. Well, most of these current media businesses in these light industrial buildings have been retooled, repurposed, but they, in essence, are still light industrial manufacturing buildings with a media company in there. And they're usually typically small media companies. In our property, we have 10 of these older buildings on our media complex. It would have been left as manufacturing, but bit by bit, we retooled them to become media space. And we've got small media companies that provide support services for the major studios that are found here in Burbank and the surrounding area. They pay rent, as most of them can't afford to own their own building, property values being what they are. But with property tax increases, of course, will affect their rents and the cost of doing business. Now, you're talking about small media companies. These aren't big balance sheets. These people are providing a valuable service, a technological service, but doesn't mean that they have the width and girth of some of the major studios. Taxing at the highest best use will put these light industrial buildings in the bullseye. What does that mean? Well, the assessors, as they look at the properties, what is the highest best use? Well, light industrial manufacturing is not the highest best use, but it could be mixed use, retail, you name it, at a higher value, and it could get taxed at that higher base. Subsequently, everything gets passed on to somebody, and usually it's the tenant at some point. And this all affects their bottom line. And these are not big companies. The pandemic has affected all these businesses, but none more than the largest industry cluster in this area, the media business. Many of you have heard, you've been watching reruns of things from 1980 and 1990 and 2000. We're all a little tired of it. Finally, we got some live sports, but content has physically been shut down because production can't happen due to the COVID protocols that are being worked out right now. The major studios have been shut down. They're trying to find the safest way to bring people back and resume filming. The smaller companies that provide the support, many in our complex, they've been idled and waiting for work product to resume. A lot of people are sitting at home waiting on the big protocol. The significant advent of the shutdown is the implementation of advanced technology to allow remote working. The digital era has already ushered in distant working opportunities while seamlessly getting simultaneous video streaming to all vendors in real time. But with safety a paramount concern, distant working provisions has become the norm in our industry. We have that implemented now. A project that was shot in Albuquerque this morning is sent to the cloud servers. The editors here in Burbank, working in some of these buildings that I have here at our complex, they take today's content from the cloud and begin their editing and send it back to the cloud. You have visual effects artists from all parts of the world able to access this cloud server, and they start beginning to do their magic on the product and send it back to the cloud. All this to say that remote work is real and will only become more the standard. Increasing costs of real estate and the cost of doing business will accelerate these remote decisions. We have witnessed film production leave California for Texas, Georgia, New York, Louisiana, Vancouver, and Toronto. Support media companies will find it easier to follow suit as remote working becomes the technological norm in the industry. It'll become the safe norm as well. Well, with the CDC protocols in place, return to the workplace means fewer people occupying floor space than pre-pandemic. Media companies will have to increase the size of their lease space to accommodate the same number of workers. If remote work is in their specialty is not an option, think of filming right on the set. You can't do remote filming. You're doing it on set with it. What used to be 150 people, you just need to space them out in a larger footprint. More rental space at a higher rate due to increased taxes will impact their ability to stay in Burbank and the surrounding areas. So these decisions are front and center for all of us in this industry. Well, enough of the gloom and doom. Not all is bad news. The pandemic is forcing the media, businesses, and industry to evaluate how it does its work. It's been pretty good. We've been looking at, doing things the same old way has been okay. But this shutdown for the last nearly 6 months has taught us, well, let's take a look at a new way of doing it. The major studios are implementing some standards, and those of us that provide the support vendor services are having to follow suit. Technology is improving the process rapidly. Efficiencies in the technology will require investment, but that'll be the new normal for the industry. While the industry will improve its methods, it will not mean this is good for Burbank and California if the costs of being here are avoided by relocating. We saw this happen in Burbank to an industry a few decades ago when Lockheed, one of the largest employers in the region in Burbank, decided to move out of state. We saw that in the film industry as they decided other states and other countries are far better equipped and far less costly to do their work. Those of us are finding ourselves in the support services able to be more mobile. These decisions with higher property tax are going to accelerate those decisions. Now, I don't have a crystal ball exactly how all this is going to work out and in what time frame, but we saw it happen, and I can't visit my friend Vic in the Lockheed building anymore because that's an era gone by. And I'd hate to see for decisions made today on taxing affect those of us in predominantly Burbank. Out of those 150,000 jobs that Mike Cusumano mentioned, I think all of us know, counting on one hand, 3 to 4 people of our neighbors and friends that work in this industry and count on this as a viable element for their families. So with that, I'll turn it back to Karen, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sunder. So I'm going to give Tom a chance, since we're running ahead of schedule. I'm going to let Tom speak. But before I do, there's a very good question here. And before we lose some panelists, because we have our, a full house still, I think this question needs to be addressed. And I'm going to let somebody raise their hand, whoever wants to answer it. It says, this is from Amy Cam. And it says, can you speak to the figures that are coming from the Yes campaign that indicate that Burbank schools would receive over $9 million in the first year if the measure passes? Who wants to take that?
So let me take the first response to this, and then Tino can maybe talk about it on a more technical level. And great question, Amy. Hi out there. I haven't seen any of the backup for where that number comes from, and quite frankly, I discount the suggestion that Burbank will get $9 million. Historically, gosh, every time there's something at a state level, it seems like we get promised, this great largesse that's going to take care of us, and it just never seems to happen. If you look at, again, as I mentioned earlier, LA Unified gets almost $15,000 per student, while Burbank barely gets $11,000. I don't trust Sacramento to take care of Burbank at the level that we need to be taken care of. When we had the lotto years ago, there was all these promises of all this money that was going to come in, and it never happened. I don't believe it. There's a better way for us to fund $10 million a year locally, and the chamber had a a suggestion on how we could do that last year that would have been very, very successful. So again, our position is that we need to fund our local schools. There's no question about that. This just isn't the way to do it. And I'd also ask you to put into context, even if it was $9 million, which I don't for a minute believe it would be, the local tax here in Burbank, the local additional tax that Burbank businesses are going to pay is going to be way more than $100 million per year. So, you know, this is sort of what we get from the state. You know, Burbank, give us another $100 million in property tax that we're going to bring to Sacramento, and, you know, maybe we'll give you $9 million. Again, I don't believe the $9 million, but I can tell you that the $100 million or more per year in additional property taxes on business is real. So that's, you know, that's where we're at. And, you know, just before I hand it over to Tino, all of us that have business interests in this community are beholden to the Burbank Unified School District. The quality of education and the quality school district that we have here is foundational to business. And, you know, there's no doubt that our schools haven't been funded properly and need to be funded properly. But, you know, I think that that's an issue that's separate from this, because this doesn't guarantee that. So anyway, Tino.
Yeah, I'll add, Michael, although you hit several of the points I would have used as an example. The lottery is a perfect example of funds promised but never delivered. I would encourage folks to go back and see what Burbank Unified was promised as part of the lottery package. I can probably promise you that it was not delivered as such. You got to remember the way that the allocation is set out by the initiative. This will be clearly spelled out when you go to the ballot box. It's a part of the ballot title and summary. Less than 40% will go to schools. So if 9 million is going to Burbank, let's assume that's true. If 9 million is going to Burbank, to Michael's point, there's much more in taxes being generated for services that aren't schools. And if Burbank just passed a sales tax, they're generating revenue for their local services. Most of that money generated. The other point I'd point out is it's not as simple as other tax measures. This isn't a sales tax where, or an income tax even. Hey, we'll add 0.5% on this person will automatically generate it. If Larry Stone, who's the assessor in Santa Clara County, even Jeff Prang, LA County's assessor, has mentioned this. They're telling folks at the board level, board of supervisors, do not count on this money until 2023, 2024. To get this $11.5 billion, they have to actually go out and reassess properties. And that's a rough figure. There's a chance they don't meet 11.5. In fact, the LAO says from 6.5 million to 11.5 million. The other thing I would say to piggyback off Michael's is ask yourself, at what cost does that $9 million come to Burbank Unified? Voters are very, very smart, and I would include that if $9 million is being generated, someone is paying that. And you have to ask yourself, with all of the flaws that I've outlined in the initiative, the way it impacts farmers, the way that it impacts our environmental community, it impacts local government budgets, it impacts schools, do we really want to tax our small businesses, our job creators, to generate no accountability or guarantee that money makes it back to the school? I 100% agree with Michael. I live in California. So does everyone on this call. We want our family members, our relatives, our friends to receive the best education possible in the 21st century. But we've got to be smarter and more strategic about how we generate that revenue. And I hope what you find after this discussion is Prop 15 is an ill-suited way to generate revenue for schools.
Did you want to say something, Sunder?
Yes, and just to add on, but in more of reading the ballot language and reading the methodology of how they're planning to divest this or spend this money. The first batch of money is going to the state government to backfill the economic shortfall due to the pandemic. As Tino just indicated, it'll be a few years by the time they ramp this up. But the first swath of money is to backfill the economic decline in the state's revenue. How big is that? We don't know. And how big will it be when they do get the money coming through the pipeline? We don't know, but they get first discretion as to what they claim is economic shortfall. Then it goes to the county assessor's office to start increasing their infrastructure, because somebody's got to go out there and find all these properties and figure out what the assessment is. And then if any of you have ever had a tax assessor come and do an audit of your place, they left a bakery and left a car wash, and then they'll come to a media place, and really it's a shooting match as to what it is they're going to come back with. You have no idea. But after that money is expended, whatever's left over, the schools will get 60% of that leftover. This is where they're using some semantics. They make it seem as if 70% is going to the school. The state gets first dibs on the money, then the assessor's office to what they need, and finally with what's left over, 60% of that leftover, whatever small percentage that is going to the schools after the county and all these other local county areas can get their funding. As Michael mentioned about the lottery, you know, I remember that tagline from those commercials when they asked us to vote for it, and the schools win too. Well, you know what? The schools did win that first year when they got all that lottery money. And the legislature said, well, gee, you made all that money on the lottery. That's money we were going to give you. We could use that for something else. So the school stayed revenue neutral when they moved the offset the lottery earnings onto other general fund programs. I see this happening again. The state will always be in dire need. And if they get first dibs at this money, I can pretty well guess how much is going to be left over for all the other entities.
And Karen, if I can, I'll add one final thing. Sometimes we always like to talk, especially at the statewide level, about who has opposed the measure. You know, I can talk about all the groups we've been able to bring together, but I'd like to highlight a minute the folks who haven't endorsed the measure. Sunder just did a great job outlining how the money's distributed. It goes to local governments first, and then it goes to schools. The League of California Cities has not and has declined to endorse the measure. They see the inequities and the flaws that exist. The California State Association of Counties declined to endorse the measure. They saw the inequalities that exist. The California School Boards Association declined to endorse the measure. All the folks agree and see that there are flaws in this measure that prevent it from being the best tool for moving forward.
Thank you, Tino. Amy had another statement, but I'm not clear on it. So Amy, maybe you want to, she says 9 million is for schools only, not the city.
Karen, what I'd imagine that is the schools and communities first, as well as our campaign, the LAO. We've been trying to figure out how this money would get distributed. The schools and communities first campaign has put out their projections on how the money would get broken out by district. I suspect that they predict BUS, Unified School District would get 9 million, and the city probably, because of how the allocation works, is getting anywhere from 20 to 21 million.
Got it. Okay.
So that money would be separate from the money that's going to schools and the money that schools are receiving. It's a great point, Amy, and I hope that more than anything you resonate with the means to the ends for that $9 million.
So if anyone else, so far we don't have any other questions. I'm going to give our CEO, Tom Flavin, the microphone for a few minutes.
Just briefly, I just want to I want to come back and underscore the impact on our business competitiveness if Prop 15 passes. And I kind of base it on two experiences. Sunder mentioned one of them, Lockheed. I happened to have been mayor of Burbank when Lockheed left. I got to sit down with the CEO, and he told me the reason they were moving to Marietta, Georgia, was the cost of doing business in California had gotten to the point where they didn't believe they could compete. And that was the first slap in the face that I got as a relatively young person, that competitiveness really was a big factor. The second factor, the second experience was that I worked outside California. I worked in economic development in Denver and Seattle. I know just how they do it. I saw it being done. Basically, what they did is they would track what the California state legislature was doing, which businesses, which industries were negatively impacted by that, identifying those industry groups or those industries that went down and looked at which companies they wanted to target on the next business recruitment trip. And that it was focused industry by industry. But what Prop 15 does, it applies to all industries. So it just opens up the opportunity for them to target businesses of all businesses are really at risk. And I think that's very important. And then finally, again, it's that Lockheed experience. Lockheed was for 50 years Burbank's largest employer. During the Cold War, they were 25,000 people were employed at Burbank. Biggest property owner, 320 acres they owned. And they owned more actually before that. And then the largest taxpayer for 50 years. If Lockheed can get up and move because of a lack of competitiveness in California, any business can get up and leave. So we better not take their presence here for granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And I will just say, I know we've talked about this at many of our board meetings. We have people that sit on our board of directors that receive phone calls all the time from Texas and Colorado and different places recruiting them to come move. So it is something very real that is happening. I don't see any other questions. So if anybody has any wrap-up comments, otherwise we're going to let everybody adjourn early.
Yeah, Karen, I'm just flagging for you that there's a separate Q&A section down low on the bottom bar. You should see a couple red numbers.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, so there's just a few questions. I'm happy to take Paul's question if that's okay, Karen.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for seeing that. They told me I thought everyone was using the chat. So
no, I just
take Paul's.
Yeah, so Paul says, my concern is that Prop 15 is the first step towards dismantling Prop 13 protections for all properties in California, including apartment buildings and single homes. Can you, the panel speak to that concern? Paul, we 100% agree with you. In fact, we believe this is just the first step in dismantling all of Prop 13's protections. Almost from the day Prop 13 was passed, it's been blamed for almost every budget issue we have at the local government, and opponents of Prop 13 have been very transparent that this is the first step. In fact, we're seeing a lot of activity online around the fact that once we pass Prop 15, we're coming for homes, and we're confident that this is the first part in a multi-step process in repealing all of Prop 13. So our goal is to stop that before that happens. But it's a great question. Homeowners should be concerned because if the state wants more revenue, they're going to find ways to get it.
Great. So then there was an anonymous question. It says, and I think this would be to Michael, where does the $100 a student come from? What is the first FY that funding from this measure, if adopted, arrives at, first year, I think we addressed that, arrives at BUSD. And would the guests clarify the state's role and authority over collection, distribution, and determination of when the reassessments are to occur? I think we've kind of answered that too.
Let me address where the $100 comes from. So if you read the actual initiative, it's section 8.7, subsection A3 is where the guaranteed minimum, distribution comes from. So that was just taken out of the actual wording the ordinance. So again, section 8.7.A.3. And so I think that was the question that
it was anonymous. Great, thank you. And then, and would the guest, I think that means Tino, the state's role and authority over collection, distribution, and determination of when the reassessments are to occur.
Yeah, so the initiative has an implementation date of Jan 1, 2022. Sunder did a great job actually teeing up the way the money's distributed. The first one is the counties are responsible for backfilling any losses in personal income tax revenue, which are almost guaranteed to be massive given the crisis we've just experienced. Then the state, because of the local control community formula, or LCCF, and Prop 98, requires that the assessors collect that money, send it to Sacramento, and it is distributed based on existing allocation formulas. We have a disagreement with the proponents on this front. Proposition 1A was a historic measure for local governments. It protects their right to locally generated funds. We believe there is an opportunity for the state to circumvent Proposition 1A and keep money. So the state does have an important role in not only the collection, but the distribution. On the primary level, assessors will collect, but again, because of Prop 98 and LCCF, the money will go to Sacramento for redistribution.
Great,
Karen.
thank you. And I have, go ahead, Sunder.
Okay, if you have more questions, and then
I have one more. Steve Mora, our vice chair of the chamber, he asked this question. So if I understand this correctly, in the simplest of terms, if I shop at Handy Market, my prices will go up because not only will his property taxes go up, but every supplier he buys from will have to increase their prices for the same reason. So all of the places he gets his meat, dairy, produce will have to raise their prices as well. Does that mean gas prices will go up to cover the cost of their tax increase as well?
Yeah, it hits the nail on the head. It's the perfect explanation of how costs get passed on. It's why the California Farm Bureau, the California League of Food Producers, Western Growers Association, Ag Council, all the folks you mentioned, California Fuels and Convenience Alliance, so gas stations are opposed. Again, these costs are going to get passed on. Someone's going to pay the $11.5 billion, and it's going to be the consumer in the form of higher gas prices, higher food prices, higher rents, higher operating costs. So it hit the nail on the head.
So I have just a couple more things. Lee Stacy, can Tino reiterate the impact of farms? I do farming in the Central Valley and live in Southern California.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. I'm from Bakersfield originally, so not too far from Burbank, but on the South Central Valley side, grew up in an ag community, and the impacts on ag are pretty sensitive to me because I know just how firsthand and devastating it would be. So the ag land, the actual land, is exempted from Proposition 15. So they won't be, farmers will not be reassessed. I want to be clear about that. I don't want to be misleading. Their land is exempt. When the proponents say ag land is exempt, they are being honest. What they are misleading about is that there are improvements in structures. If I own a dairy, the ground that the dairy on is exempt, but the actual milking parlor, the barn, the irrigation systems, all of the fixtures and improvements on that land are subject to reassessment. What's unique about the California ag industry is to insulate margins and costs. They've become so heavily vertically integrated that oftentimes the producer is the processor, is the real retailer. So a lot of ag companies have large scale manufacturing and processing facilities where almonds get processed, where strawberries get processed, milk gets processed. All of those, every step of the way from the moment that product comes out of the field to the grocery store is taxed. And remember, the grocery store is going to be taxed. So every step of the way in ag is looking at several impacts to some of their biggest industries. One exception to that, when I say that crops won't be impacted, vines and trees are actually subject to reassessment under Proposition 15, because once they start producing fruit, their value changes, and that's considered a substantial improvement. And so trees, I mean, think about it, an orange is going to be taxed under this initiative. An apple, a grape, an avocado, all of those things are going to be taxed. So you're going to see the proponents say that ag land is exempt. In fact, the Attorney General made it very clear that the proponents had to be specific when they said ag land is excluded, because ag itself is not fully excluded. So I hope that answers your question.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And I just want to, there's one last question, but I'm going to save that because it's about how people can join in and help. So we'll do, and I know Tino and Tom can both answer that. But I just wanted to share, Anna Connell had said that she personally didn't like the way the proposition was written, and also agree it could create more problems than it addresses. But as an FYI, BUSD was told they would get approximately 9 million. So that, you know, and that is where our schools were in such need. So that's a number that's very meaningful to them. So I don't know how that you know, where that came from originally, but I just wanted to share her comments with you.
If you have a wrap-up comment, Karen, and I like historical impact, because that's what I lived on, and you watch the government historically, and there's a sense of cynicism among us and many people of how the government operates. 1989, during the World Series, there was a Loma Prieta earthquake, and San Francisco was devastated. The state of California, the government came out and put an initiative in front of the voters and said, we have to help rebuild San Francisco, and they asked for a 1/2 cent sales tax to rebuild Loma Prieta. I think that tax won by over 70%, because we all have a heart for the state. We all have a heart for our fellow humans, and we passed it, thinking that we're rebuilding Loma Prieta. That went on, and everyone forgot about that 1/2 cent. In 2000, when the dot-com boom happened, we lost that 1/2 cent sales tax, because they wrote in the legislation, not when Loma Prieta is built, we can get rid of the 1/2 cent sales tax. They wrote in that when the state has a 10% or greater budget surplus, then that 1/2 cent sales tax can be removed. And they never expected the state to have a 10% budget surplus, but they did with the dot-com era back then. So the following January 1, we lost the sales tax, that 1/2 cent, for 1 year. Lo and behold, the devil's in the details. They wrote a secondary string on it saying, oh, in order for that 1/2 cent not to come back, we have to maintain a 10% budget surplus at the state. Well, we knew what happened when they had 10% budget surplus. They spent it all, went below 10%, 1/2 cent came back. We voted on that based on rebuilding San Francisco, and that the legislation was written in anything but rebuilding San Francisco, but was a constant revenue stream. And it was never for the intended purpose they had indicated originally. The devil's always in the details, and I have a high level of cynicism about everything that's written in this language.
Thank you, Sunder. So now we have someone that's asked, how can I be associated with the movement and how can I participate? So Tino, I'll let you start, and then Tom, you can address that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. And it's a great question. We're looking for all the help we can get. I want to be clear that we really want to win in November, but we also want to win in a way that shows any interest that's, looking to repeal Prop 13. It's not going to happen. And if we can deliver a resounding victory in November and we can send one clear message, leave Prop 13 alone. And so how you can help is the first thing you can do is get your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers, your family members, get them to join our coalition individually. Here's why that's so important. If they go to our website and they join the coalition, they enter their email address, they automatically get included in all of our communications. Tom knows this. We are sending stuff out every day, press releases, op-eds, new information, new ways to get involved. The first thing we can do is help people get educated on what the initiative does. The second is, while you're on that website, go to the Take Action page. We know people are going to ask how they can help, so we've given one clean place to go find out how you can help. Post on social media. Send us firsthand testimonials of what Prop 15 would do to you and your business. Share a Facebook photo. Get people to like our posts. Send a letter to the editor. Check out that Take Action page that has a lot of information. And the third is encourage your neighbors to attend town halls like this. The Burbank Chamber is such a leader and is way ahead of the curve in terms of making sure there are forums to get educated. It's a challenging time for campaigns. Usually I'd be taking the show on the road. I'd be like a traveling circus. I'd be popping up at all these different places. We'd be doing in-person town halls. It's just not the reality this year. So virtual town halls, email communications, those are the ways we're going to have to stay connected because we're going to have to work together to beat this. So I want to thank the Burbank Chamber for their leadership. I want to thank Michael, Karen, Sunder, Tom. Thank you for having me. Thank you everyone for joining. Really, really excited to get to work with you guys to beat this in November.
Thank you, Tino. And Tom?
Yes, basically I've got 3 or 4 suggestions. First of all, if you're a business or, well, anybody, everybody's going to be impacted. That's the message that's been communicated here. So you need to talk to your business associates, to your vendors, to your friends, to your neighbors. Let them know that this is coming so they have the information they need. And I got to tell you, the best place to get that information is on Prop 15, the state's website, .com. And get to that because there's great information there. I thought I knew a lot about it until I got all their information. I go, boy, I just barely scratched the surface. Thirdly, if you want to be involved here in Burbank at the local level, send an email to info@burbankchamber.org. Let us know so we can put you together with other local folks who are already involved. And I know in Tino's network of supporters, there's a large contingent from Burbank. And fourth, there's going to be another webinar in October on Prop 15, and we've got to keep the momentum going. And also remember the mail-out ballots go out in October. So, some people are going to be voting early. So we've got to get this information out in a hurry. So
Tom, do we have a date? Do we have a date for October?
I think it's the week of October 3rd or October 5th, something like that.
Okay, and also we've recorded this this webinar, and this will be on our chamber webpage as well, right, Tom?
Yes.
Okay, great. So if you have friends that you want to tell about, I had one late question come in. Please email us links to the Zoom meetings about this so we can promote. Yes, we can do that. I think we can email all of the participants today. We could email them the links. Okay, great. And I think with that.
So, Karen, let me just close out with one final thought. We still have a lot we need to do here in Burbank. We haven't solved the funding issue for the Burbank Unified School District. I think if we rely on Sacramento to do that, it's not going to happen. And so we still have a lot of work to do. You know, this battle now is in the forefront, but you know, we can't forget about continuing to take care of this local infrastructure that's so important. And that's really a conversation that we need to have as a community. And we need to take care of ourselves and not rely on Sacramento. So it's something to look forward to in the future.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for always being so willing to facilitate with that. But I think that's it. Okay, gentlemen, thank you for your time and all the great information, and we will see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Stay safe, healthy.